Hey everyone, it's Ellis, and this is going to be the patch 12.7 notes rundown, and this is still the scuffed version without any editing sort of going on with it, so I hope that you do bear with me. If you guys saw my patch 12.7 preview, we'll see what ends up actually happening here. If you don't know where the previews are uploaded, they're uploaded to the highlights channel, because I'm never really sure exactly how long they'll end up going. So 12.7 nerfs are going to be to Jace, Lee Sin, Ryze, and Zeri, and then we are getting a lot of buffs, and then an adjustment on Rengar, and we're getting a lot of system changes. So this does look like it is a meaty patch, and we do think that Riot will always cycle the two patches, so 12.8 is going to be nothing, and then 12.9 hopefully does have something. Well, 12.8 will be nothing unless the Faceless God, Void Queen, jungler thing, person, whatever, ends up coming out in it. And so we'll see if that ends up happening. Champions, Gangplank, passive burn damage, base damage increased, late W mana cost decrease. Gangplank is arguably struggling at all levels of play. No, he's not. He's already gotten gun power in his Q and his barrel, so we're putting some more power into less explosive and more orange parts of his kit. Okay, passive, trial by fire, 55 to 310 now, levels 1 to 18. So they just increased his damage for literally no reason in his laning phase, which his laning phase is already actually pretty strong in a lot of instances. W removes Scurry. The mana cost is going to go down. Now, one of the things that I will say about this is that it doesn't go down until later on in the game. Normally, you never put points into it, and I don't necessarily think that putting a second point into it just because the mana cost is so much less is really going to justify it. I don't think that you're randomly going to tech one extra point into W. And so this is truly like, a post-level 13 sort of buff. I mean, it does help him team fight, I guess. He gets a little bit of extra mana in team fighting. But for the most part, the mana is mostly going to be negligible. I mean, what is he going to cast? 2 Ws in a team fight late game or something? So he's ultimately getting access to 40 more mana in the later stages. And again, this is just entirely off the idea that you're not going to be putting one extra point in W in order to get access to the rank 2 W or something. So that's pretty much it. Gwen, E cooldown refund increased. R cooldown decreased early. Gwen's been hanging on by a thread with most of her recent nerfs, so we're stitching her up with some cooldown buffs to help her across all skill levels. So when Riot ended up tagging Gwen, what they ended up doing is they reduced her auto attack range, and this actually made it a lot harder for Gwen to function inside of the jungle and her auto attack range on her E when it was enhanced. But what this ended up actually doing is totally not only hurting her jungle, but also crippling her ability to lane and top lane unless it was already a counterpick matchup, which we have seen her picked in some cases in most recent pro games. E skip and slash cooldown refund from the first basic stack is 50 to 60. This doesn't really do a whole lot. It ends up being completely almost useless by mid and late game because the cooldown is almost up permanently anyway. So it feels very, very luxurious to be getting this. I mean, yes, it does help in the early lane with that 10% when you don't have any CDR and early laning. It is going to be valuable. But for the most part, it really does just feel like Riot is missing the mark here with the Gwen change. So I don't really know what to say in this regard. I have no idea why they don't just revert her range and then cripple her bonus damage to monsters, or just make it so that she can't deal damage to monsters. That way she just stays as a top laner. And then you can end up doing stuff like, you can alter or affect the way that her W works. You can make its radius smaller or something like that, and then you can actually end up buffing it for Gwen herself, as long as you make the radius and everything different, or like maybe the duration, yada, yada, yada. I think that would be a lot better. Our needlework cooldown 120 to 80 to 100 to 80. So again, kind of a luxurious nerf, or kind of luxury in the sense that like it really is not likely to change anything. Again, Gwen does not get ability power, or not ability power. Gwen doesn't get ability haste in the early stages anyway, and so having 20 seconds shaved off, it can be nice. Gwen generally will look for something whenever her ultimate is up inside of laning phase. So whenever needlework is available, if she's running Ignite or she's running Ghost, depending on the matchup, she can look for lethal. Having the CDR shaved off does help her look for that, like on repeat. But again, it's not the end of the world. These things just feel very, very luxurious, and almost like they're not going to really touch on what her real problems are. Jace, base health, health growth, and armor adjusted. So health growth is going to be 90 to 95, so he's going to end up getting 5 per level. And then health is going to go down actually by, okay, I mean, that's not actually the end of the world, right? It's only going, it's only going down by 45. So in late game, he's actually buffed in terms of his health, which is kind of cool. Base armor, 27 to 22. That makes him a lot weaker in a lot of the matchups that he has up in top lane. And then armor growth 3.5 to 3.8. Okay, so he will end up getting armor back over time. At level 18, he is going to be unchanged, but obviously his early laning is going to be a lot more susceptible. Now, one of the things that I will say is that his early laning against AP champions, because we're only talking about like levels 1 through 6, he is going to be missing HP versus AP champions, and so even poke champions like Ornn, Malphite, they're going to be able to get their lethal ranges against him a lot easier. This armor change, because we've been seeing a lot of Jace and Ornn and stuff, this armor change is really impactful because Ornn actually maxes Q against Jace, and Ornn's Q is physical damage, and so having less armor and having less health means that Ornn can actually set up for lethal a lot easier. This is very good for like Graves, Tryndamere, all those types of champions that likes to tango with him, and then I believe Wukong as well is in this patch, so we'll see what ends up happening. Kalista, base mana, move speed, and attack speed growth increased. Base mana up by 50, move speed is up by 5, and then attack speed growth 4 to 4.5%. So the thing is that Kalista is the utility AD carry now. Obviously, she does have some kill lane still down in bot that you would end up playing her with, but for the most part, I mean, these types of changes are not what's making people think, oh, Kalista's unplayable. People are not looking at Kalista and be like, man, if I just had a little bit more mana, I totally would have been able to play her. The attack speed growth is relatively negligible because, again, either you're picking her for lane dominance, in which case you're not actually seeing that much of a percent increase because we're talking about, like, 2.5% attack speed or something, in early laning where you're looking for kill thresholds. And obviously the movement speed is very negligible as well. So this isn't really big to Kalista. It helps remind people that she exists, but this isn't the kind of placebo buffs that I was referring to when I was saying that Riot should do something. Now, speaking of Shadow's Isle champions, which are not totally useless and should just be forgotten about, Q lay waste. Damage against monsters, 85% to 95%. So Karthus, very scary. While the Death Singer remains powerful in the bot lane, that is actually his best role, I think, is AD carry. His voice has been faltering in the jungle, ramping up his clear speed to bring jungle Karthus back from the dead. Well, all you need to do is look at LCS Academy to see that Karthus is not in the Death Realm at all. He's permanently banned there. But Karthus, Q lay waste, don't really know what they're doing here. Honestly, people might remember that I used to be a really big Karthus enthusiast, and one of the things that made me feel bad when I came back off a really big break was his Q felt totally different inside of the jungle, and all that you had to do was actually relearn it. But now his Q is going to be back to where it was at before, and I think that that's totally insane. That's just super, super nuts that he's getting the damage back. You've already had people have really, really good clears on Karthus. There was the clear that C9 had versus TL. I think that was one of the fastest competitive Karthus clears that's ever happened, and that was without this buff. So Karthus's clear speed is going to be absolutely broken, and with all the other junglers getting tagged, Karthus just inevitably continues his reign of dominance as an AP king in the jungle. Lee Sin, base AD decrease, Q base damage decrease. So Lee Song is going to continuously keep getting nerfed. He's going to have his base AD brought down by 2. Sonic Wave Resonating Strike damage is going to be nerfed as well, pretty much across the board. What this ends up meaning is I would really just like to start creating like a Google document of shit pro players say. Every single time that like champions like this will get nerfed, and they'll attribute like the inability to have that champion be picked anymore to aforementioned nerf, and then 3-4 months go by, and then all of a sudden the champion comes back or something like that. The problem with Lee Sin is that Lee Sin's going to keep getting hit regardless of how good he is or how bad he actually is in any instance. Now, I did think that Lee Sin was good as a mid and a top laner. The reason that I've always been so adamant against Lee Sin is that some people would say vocally that the most recent changes to itemization inside of the jungle was very helpful for Lee Sin because some of his rougher matchups were removed. Lee Sin benefits a lot from Death's Dance. They benefit a lot from Black Cleaver, but most of the times when you'll also hear them in the same vein talk about Lee Sin, they'll talk about Lee Sin for early game. So if you're talking about Lee Sin for early game, then why, as a jungler player, are you referencing his second and third item build paths? It doesn't make any sense. You can mention it as like an offhand thing, but like to reference it as like a reason that maybe this champion should be good now doesn't actually make any sense. That's not very logical. The other thing about this is that Lee Sin disappeared for a really long period of time, and a lot of people grew akin to his gank patterns, how he would go about doing things inside of competitive, and obviously at international play, Lee Sin will feel pretty bad to play against really good players, unless you are the significantly better player, in which case sometimes you will still opt into picking him. You might have seen in obviously the LCK, you have players like Owner that are like playing Lee Sin and, doing all this other stuff. But one of the things that I think that a lot of people don't seem to recognize about like pro players and champions like Lee Sin, champions like Orianna, champions like Thresh, etc., is that these are the premier picks of the pro players for the last couple of years. And pro player champion pool, pro player unique pick, all of these things, it's not that it's not a secret anymore, right? That we're getting basically the same champions over and over and over. Some pro players are rotating, as little as 5 champions pretty much for the last few years. And the reason is because even when whatever champion it is that's really good of theirs that is getting mained, let's say that it's Syndra, let's say that she ends up getting nerfed. Well, now because Syndra is not there to gatekeep Orianna or gatekeep Victor, we're going to go to Orianna, we're going to go to Victor. Okay, well, now Victor and Orianna maybe are going to get nerfed. Okay, well, now we're going to go to Corki and we're going to go to Azir. These are the same champions that we've been playing. Okay, and then Azir gets nerfed and Corki gets nerfed. Well, it's like, okay, well, now everything's been nerfed. I'm going to do Syndra again. And then the cycle will keep repeating that way. And obviously, we get mini reworks, which propel a new champion into the meta, like Ahri, where Ahri starts coming in. This is why I'm so adamant about our dependency right now inside of Pro Play for new champion releases and for reworks. It's because of right now Pro Play complacency is at an all-time high, and obviously the best champions that pro players are going to be good at are going to be the ones that they have never been forced to change off of for the last 3-4 years. Obviously, their mains, which, I mean, they are at this point, right? These are the champions they were playing 5 days a week in scrims. These are the champions that they're playing on scrim, inside of, extra scrims. These are the champions that they're playing on stage. A lot of these are the champions that they're also playing in solo queue. It doesn't matter how much they get nerfed. Their proficiency on the champion is so high that it outweighs their willingness to play other champions, or even look at whether or not another champion is worth actually being picked. And this cycle is causing things like this, where Lee Sin, I do not think, needs any sort of a nerf. But the problem is that he's maybe every jungler's most played jungler. Like, maybe well, not every jungler, but like 99% of junglers most played jungler. I'm sorry for this like little side rant right now, but obviously this is what's impacting a lot of the patch notes, and this is what impacts my frustration, and my uncertainty in what Riot needs to do in these patches, because I've said time and time again, whether you've come from my highlights channel, you watch me here on this channel say this, or you watch me on my stream, that Riot has done a phenomenal job at balance. The game right now is actually probably the most balanced, and it continues to be, that it has ever been, ever, right? And we have some outliers, but even those outliers actually have answers if you would actually look for them. Problem is no one looks for them. And that those answers are extremely specific in their own right, but that those answers can be picked. And so I think that that's really beautiful in its own way. But there's so many champions that just are not getting picked, and sometimes it's even because people are complete clowns like myself, and don't totally read the changes to certain champions. For instance, I thought Ornn was a totally garbage, useless champion after the ornament rework, where he couldn't get 2 items for himself, and he could only bestow, 1 item to the teammate, and all the items were roughly the same gold value, and they didn't really have as much impactful change as some of the previous ornaments. And then it was pointed out to me very recently that Ornn has a new passive per ornament that he bestows to a teammate. And I didn't even actually know that. And then I actually went back and I looked at Ornn's actual nerfs and other stuff, and I'm just like, oh, wow, actually, Ornn is still insane. And if someone like me can be a complete clown circus case in that regard, then just imagine all the people that don't actually bother to read the patch notes or look at items or look at League Wiki and look at stuff on Champions. So 99% of the pro player base. So, and I mean, I can understand that, right? Because it's not the job or the obligation to try to find stuff. Anyways, mini rant that got triggered by the Sin Nerf because this champion does not need to be nerfed, and it is a tragedy that he is being nerfed because of the aforementioned problems due to complacency in pro play and the cycling of the pros mains over and over and over because other champions are not aptly being buffed in order to make people forcefully learn them so they could eventually go back and, you know, play those champions. Anyways, Lilia, passive healing against champions increased. W base damage increased. Okay, so Riot's really trying to force Lilia. The problem here is healing against champions 12 to 140, levels 1 to 18 plus 12% AP to 12 to 140. So the base remains the same at plus 20% AP. The issue is that Lilia does not get high AP ratios. Lilia will get Liandry's, and then she will get Zhonya's. She will maybe have a Darkseal. And now we're talking about, like, mid-late game Lilia. We're talking about 2 items. Lilia is, you're actually looking at 8% of, like, 200 ability power. And it's just so, it's so negligible. And it's not impacting her ability inside of fights. It doesn't matter about this 8% ability power inside of these fights. The healing is not going to change how Lilia is affecting things. And early on, it's totally negligible because you're talking about 8% of 100. You're talking about, you know, 8 heal. Literally, quite literally, healing against champion is going to be 8 in the early and mid-game stages because she just doesn't have ability power. W, watch out, Eep. 70 to 150, 35% AP to 80 to 160 plus 35% AP. So a little bit more damage on her W. I don't know if it impacts her clear speed, but all in all, Riot is at least doing the thing where they're trying to do these micro buffs saying, please play this champion, please play this champion. The issue with Lilia is that she's a champion that is not an individual played champion. And what I mean by that is that even if you're really good as a jungler, there will come a point versus enemy teams where your teammates still have to respect how Lilia plays, how Lilia wants to play, and the playstyle tendencies. This ends up impacting other AP junglers that are very unique, such as Evelynn, Fiddlesticks, Karthus. And then for AD junglers, there's not really 80 junglers, I think, that have minigames with how they want to play. I guess kind of Nocturne early on would be like a minigame jungler. But I think that Nocturne's a lot more understandable for the majority of pro teams because he's just Smork. He just says Zug Zug and let's go in for the most part. Shadowcane, I think, is in the same exact vein as that. I think that champions like Viego are in the same vein as that. They're all Zug Zug, whereas Lilia, Karthus, Evelynn, Fiddlesticks, these are all very cerebral junglers. They require a lot of thought. They want planning. They want setup. And it's very different from their AD counterparts. Nico. W, passive base damage and move speed increase. Nico's been hidden from pro play despite being a strong tomato in solo queue. Her on-hit build was quite popular in the past metas. True, so we're bringing it back to lure the curious chameleon out of hiding. Okay, so passive bonus magic damage 50 to 130 to 50 to 170 plus 60% AP. Passive move speed is going to go from 10 to 30 to 10 to 40. So this is very big. Now, I said in my preview on my highlights channel that I need to know exactly what happened to Nico for her to fall out of the meta with the on-hit, because as it stands right now, I believe she has a better on-hit build path than she had in the past. And this is really good because Nico is really good against all the tanks that can appear in top lane with her on-hit play. The W shape splitter has a lot of skill to it, and that you can actually dodge abilities using it if you cast it at the right time. You can also dodge auto attacks if you cast it at the right time, I believe. And this is a very massive buff, and I like that they've gone very light on it because I do think that Nico has gotten aid from a lot of other areas that are indirect to her, and because no one's actually playing her or researching her, we don't actually know where her current power level is at. So I think that's really good that they're doing it this way. Pantheon. You guys might have seen on Twitter yesterday, I actually said that Pantheon, I believe, is one of the worst champions in the entire game. This is a champion whose kit does not justify the means. This is a champion who lacks damage in order to justify his kit. This is a champion that is a complete mess after everything that happened to him. So base health regen is going to be down by 1.5. Comet Spear, Q tap length is going to go up by 50 range. However, the width is going to go down by 30 range. So would you change your length for a little, would you change your length for girth? That's ultimately the question, E Aegis Assault. Pantheon is no longer slowed if moving backwards while E Aegis Assault is active. This doesn't really matter. Grand Starfall. Pantheon now crashes down on its destination a quarter second faster. It does not actually matter. These are not the things that are gating Pantheon from coming back into competitive play. The things that are getting Pantheon from coming back into competitive play is that he doesn't have enough damage or durability, even with his Aegis Assault and the damage blocker, to reliably engage upon opponents. His dependency on items is so much greater than other champions who are supposed to be on a fast or famine playstyle. And what I mean by that, Pantheon is very a feast or famine in that regard, but even when he's feasting, he's not really feasting. Let me give you an example of some champions that don't have as much of a dependency on items in order to achieve similar value. You're looking at Qiyana, you're looking at Talon or something like that inside of the jungle. I mean, these are champions that they do not need a lot of items in order to completely nuke you. Pantheon actually does, because if he actually tries to go in, he does not tap you and run rotation. And his counterplay is actually a lot greater than, say, a Qiyana or a Talon. And his maneuverability inside of fights and stuff is also not as nimble as a Qiyana or Talon. So Pantheon has a problem with current items combined with his current base stats, combined with his current lack of beefiness. And that is what makes Pantheon one of the worst champions in the game. Rengar. Q bonus damage against structures reduced. W bonus damage against monsters increased. Q Savagery. Savagery's bonus damage is reduced by 40% against structures. Fine. Battle Roar. Bonus magic damage against monsters. 65 to 150, or 130 to 85 to 150. So bonus magic damage base is just up. I think that's totally fine. This just helps his clear speed. Everything I've been hearing from some of the Korean Rengar players, I actually have 2 of them added right now on Korea, is that all the Rengar changes are perceived as a ultra positive buff and that it's very, very good. And so that's nice to hear. With his clear speed actually being increased, this is really good. This is also really cool. Maybe Lane Ivern, could end up coming back, and then you get Lane Ivern plus Rengar unescapable ganks, and that's always really fun. Or Rengar Ivern bot lane, something like that. Just keep that in mind. Rise, Q damage AP ratio increase, bonus mana ratio decrease. Q overload, magic damage, 75 to 150 plus 45% AP, 3% bonus mana, to 70 to 150 plus 50% AP plus 2% bonus mana. So I said before that Rise has been all over the place anyway with his runes. Right now I think the flavor of the month is to go Spellbook. And thus you gain access to other runes. He was on Phase Rush. I don't believe that Rise is not able to just maybe go an offensive rune to make up for some of the lack of damage, and he'll still, he just has to learn how to play differently. And then the reasons that he's being picked, he'll still be picked for, which is ultimately just his wave clear, and then his ability to rotate with jungle and other stuff. And then obviously, yes, he does have the blue Rise build, which is like full-on tank, lots of mana, etc. But that is a build that is very bad if it's drafted well against, but the problem is that people are drafting into it rather than against it, and then he ends up getting rewarded, and we end up having an artificially strong champion. And Rise, much like Lee Sin, I think is a victim of the same boat. Wukong, Q cooldown decrease. So I'm very excited about this change. Also, I'm very excited about this patch so far. Not necessarily totally about the changes, but I feel like I've gotten into a lot of the meat of some of the issues, and I actually feel like this might have been one of the most vocal and descriptive patch rundowns that I've done in years. I don't know. I'm feeling pretty good. I do have a little bit of brain fog right now, so I realize that sometimes I am getting jumbled on some stuff. I did just wake up. I still even have my coffee right here, and I rushed towards doing this video, and yeah, that's it. Crushing Blow, 9 to 7 seconds to 8 to 6 seconds. W, Warrior Trickster, 20 to 12 seconds. Tap the window. To the windows, through the walls. Wukong can now dash over terrain using W. E Nimbus Strike, 60 to 200 plus AP, 80 to 200 plus 100% AP. So I don't know if Wukong has justification for like getting a Darksteel or something like that. I don't know what this AP buff is. Bonus magic damage against monsters, 50 to 80%. So the thing is these are massive Wukong buffs inside of the jungle. Massive, massive, massive. Even for top lane Wukong, they are so big. For top lane Wukong, I can't wait to see what excuse Harambe has now for why he can't climb. These are super big Wukong buffs. These are actually this is so good for jungle. Top lane, don't get me wrong, it is buffs for top lane. This is really big for jungle. I'm curious to see if Wukong can end up actually being a jungler. I'm going to need to evaluate this a little bit, but it does look like it's good news. Yasuo, base health increased, R cooldown decreased early. Health is up by 30, so you get like an auto attack. Last breath cooldown is reduced, so he'll have it up basically every minute. I mean, 10 seconds just gives you a little bit more of a window, so it just makes his laning phase a lot stronger. That's ultimately it. Yone, R cooldown decreased late. Yone is getting more access to his ult, but with a focus on late game, which is when it's harder for him to gap close unless he's already extremely far ahead. 120 to 80 seconds to 120 to 60 seconds. So Yone will have it up now every single team fight without fail. The problem is that in late game, generally your team fights operate around about a 60-second window, no matter what. 60 to 70-second window, which means that he usually already had his ultimate up anyway. So this is just completely a placebo buff. Yasuo's at least is a little bit more reasonable and definitely better. I do think that also in competitive, if you were proficient at both of the champions, Yasuo is the better of the brother to end up playing, which is kind of interesting in its own way. So Zeri. Okay, this is a cluster of a change. Zeri. Base AD growth and armor decreased. Health growth increased. Q base damage increased. AD ratio increased. Now applies on-hit effects only once per cast. Now, okay, Zeri has been getting tagged. So, AD growth, 2 to 1.5. Attack damage, 53 to 87 to 50 to 75.5. Wow. Base armor down by 2. Health growth is up by 5. Health is increased. So, she gets tankier, but that doesn't actually impact her Titanic Hydra build all that much. Total physical damage on Burst Fire is going to go from 10 to 30 plus 10% total AD to 7 to 15. Plus 120% total AD. Okay, so there's a threshold here where it ends up returning, which is going to be much later, and that should really play into her character of being like a hyper late game carry. Burstfire Knight only applies on-hit effects once per cast. Okay, so they're trying to move her into the crit route of Zeri. Zeri can now only gain 1 stack of R Lightning Crash and 1 instance of E Spark Surge cooldown reduction per 0. Okay. Critical Strike chances on Q Burst Fire grant Zeri an additional R Lightning Crash instance of E. Okay, that's good. So they're moving her into the crit route. I like what they're doing here. They're making her late game stronger, and they're making her early and mid game a little bit weaker, which I think is the correct way to balance her. I think this is, again, I mean, you really do have to give credit to Riot sometimes. Yes, they release things like Zeri, totally fine. We dial it back. We get a couple of weeks of pro play where it's banned. Sometimes we see it. Love to see it. It's a new champion, shakes up the meta. Sometimes things end up getting looked at, and it's specifically to answer the champion. And then because they get looked at, people actually realize that hey, they actually might have merit, which is like the Gnosis thing, right? So I think in that regard, it is really good. And please, Riot, release the new champion already and rework another one. My God, everything is so stale. W, Ultra Rocket Laser, 40 to 180, plus 100% total AD, 60% AP. 10 to 150, okay, plus 120%. Okay, this is fine. So, yeah, they're just making her have to go crit, and they're making her late game a lot stronger. They're making her fall into the hyper stuff. She's going to also be more nimble now because, well, unless she goes Gale Force or something like that. But, yeah, I think depending on how Zeri builds, I mean, all around, this is just a lot better for her. I think it's healthier for the game, and Zeri is still going to be picked, so do not worry. Items, Abyssal Mask. Abyssal Mask has taken a backseat to Force of Nature in terms of magic resist options in this game. We're buffing Abyssal Mask's passive Unmake to help it stand out in an aggressive tank option. So, before I respond to this, I'm just going to take a moment here to remind Riot that Banshee's Veil should not be the only AP magic resist item in the game. I think that's a complete, I think that's not okay. I think that we need to do a little bit of creative thinking here, and we have to think of another AP magic resist item to maybe ship or something. Maybe that would be really cool if we could do something like that. Because I think when you have pro players failing to understand that their Banshee's Veil will be popped by a Corki Rocket, or the enemy has a Ziggs or something like that, and it's a really bad idea to build a Banshee's Veil, and yet they're doing it anyway because there's no other AP options, I think it just feels really bad. Unmake magic resist reduction 5 plus 1% bonus health capped at 20 to 5 plus 1.2% bonus health capped at 25. So you could end up getting 25 magic pen. Again, I still don't think that you'll end up building the item. If anyone's ever moused over the unmake damage, it feels really bad when you're like singular champion and you're applying it, and it just doesn't look like it's doing a whole lot. Gale Force. Gale Force has been the go-to marksman mythic for a while now and has made hyper carries like Jinx and Philius a bit too safe in pro play. We're increasing Gale Force active cooldown to give opponents larger window 90 to 110 seconds. This does actually mean that it will not immediately be up for team fights in most instances, much akin to Zanya's, so I do think that that is good. Moonstone Renewer, they couldn't let me escape. 7%, maximum 35% of 5 stacks to 6%, maximum 30% of 5 stacks. This is fine. Moonstone was really broken, even at 6%, and then they overbuffed it at 7%, so I think this is totally fine. I do think this is a nerf to... Oh, so now Seraphine actually... Seraphine's in a weird spot with the Moonstone with her last changes. That just immediately came to mind, where they took away her AP and they made her into more of a healer, but now with the Moonstone going down, this does actually come back and hit her. This does hit Yuumi, it hits Soraka, it hits Sona, it hits everyone, right? But I do think that, like, I think Ivern in laning phase does get affected by this. He just loses 5% of his Z inside of laning phase, which does feel a little bit bad. A lot of people don't realize that you can proc Moonstone inside of laning phase now, which was what was the really broken thing about the change to the item, is that you can activate it during laning phase, and if you have heals or shields on your champion, then you immediately get access to them while you're in combat, and a lot of people don't realize that. Umbral Glaive. Okay, so 2400 to 2300. This makes me really happy. I tried finding the clip. I couldn't find it. Once upon a time, there was a period where Umbral Glaive was a lot more expensive than this. My suggestion was that you make Umbral Glaive a 2300 gold item and that you reduce some of its stats and that people would immediately start picking it, because now, rather than it's not just 2400 gold, before it was more gold, now this is several camps cheaper to come online and it has a lot of power. This is a direct buff to Pyke as well. Blackout cooldown is down. All of this is fantastic. I do believe that this item will end up getting built, probably on, like, Graves jungle, any of the junglers that utilize this. Winter's Approach increased by 700. Combined cost is going to be 1100 gold, and then health is going to be 400 to 350. So I don't know if this means that Fimble Winter still has its old HP and that Winter's Approach is just nerfed, but ultimately I think this is totally fine. Fimble Winter, a really good item. Immediate health and mana restoration, 50% to 30%. Bonus movement speed, 5% to 4%. So this is kind of fine. I think that no matter what, Time War Dominic will still be picked in some matchups over Cosmic Insight or Approach Velocity, so I think this is a balanced change. Doesn't really matter. ARAM doesn't matter. Mythic content overhaul. Honestly, I think that has been really, really good. Piltover Clash. So one of the things that I will say for people that watch from patch rundowns for the solo queue Clash stuff, tier list changes on Patreon and whatnot, there are a lot of changes. So that you can probably expect them out in like 2 days or something. There will be the new images because I think there's enough meat here for changes to both of the lists, and I think that'll be really, really good. We move on to the skins. Arcana Ahri. Don't really know how to feel about this. It feels like some Marvel superhero from the Eternals or something like that. That's all I'm really getting from that. Arcana Hecarim, again, this all just feels very Marvel-esque in nature. I really do like the aesthetics. I think that it does look fantastic. I really, really, really love the colors. I love when this kind of red and gold and white are blended together. I think it's really good. Arcana Rise, honestly, this looks like Jhin is reading a book, and I wouldn't put it past him. Also, interesting to note that Rise's skin color in this is he's actually back to being Human Rise, which is very interesting. So maybe Arcana Magic has traits or qualities in it that are able to undo. Oh, I don't know actually why Rise is blue. I don't know if that's a byproduct of a certain spell that he was cast, or maybe he's afflicted with something or whatnot, but I just thought that this was very interesting. And then, okay, Arcana, Xayah, and Rakan. This gives some, like, Twilight vibes. This is like Edward and, what was her name? What was the... Bella? Was it Bella culling? I don't know. This gives some Twilight vibe. Oh, you know what? Actually, no. This is like Jasper and whatever the mind reading vampire was. And now we're on the chromas. So honestly, if I played Ahri, I would always play this one because this allows me to play the Black Lotus in game. Best magic card of all time. This skin looks absolutely sick in game. This is one of the most pretty skins I've ever seen in game, and this is beautiful. Arcana Rise, okay, it honestly looks like scuffed Jhin. This mask just does not look, this mask literally looks like the Joker's goons are about to rob a bank or something like that. I have absolutely no idea what's going on here. this mask is killing this skin. I have no idea. It actually looks like Ditto tried to copy Jhin. You know, like Ditto from the anime and stuff, when it copies a Pokemon and the Pokemon just looks like it's stupid or something. This literally looks like Rise cast a spell to try to look like Jhin, and that's what we got. The Hecarim thing, okay. I mean, the splash art looks a lot better than the in-game skin. Some of these actually already look like pre-existing skins. The Xayah skins definitely look really good, and the Rakan skins, yeah, I mean, he looks like a bard from an MMO or something like that. He looks like a bard or a dancer or something like that from an MMO, and I think that's pretty much it. So that was it for the patch rundown. This was really long, but honestly, I felt really good about this one. I felt like I got to talk about a lot of stuff. There are a lot of changes. We did get some stuff which should affect pro play. So that's actually good. All right. Okay. All right. Don't worry. Don't worry, Riot. I'm no longer sad at the time of the ending of this video. Okay.